If reports are to be believed, it seems that CM Punk is coming back to professional wrestling after a long 7 years, with him set to join WWE's closest competitor, All Elite Wrestling. Punk hasn't been seen in the ring since Royal Rumble 2014, that's if you don't count that time he showed up on an indie show in a mask, and since that Rumble, fans' calls for his return have been shot down until now. Punk left WWE on extremely bad terms, and him coming back to join AEW is poetic justice. With that said, many have speculated how AEW should debut CM Punk, as well as what his first feud and match should be. In today's video, I'm presenting 5 ideas for how AEW should book CM Punk. Colt Cabana and CM Punk met early on in their wrestling careers and became close friends almost instantly. The two men toured the country together on the independent circuit, working against each other and working as a team known as the Second City Saints. They remained the best of friends for years, so much so that Colt was referenced in Punk's infamous pipe bomb promo, saying, "Hey Colt Cabana, how you doing?" Little did he know what would happen just years later. When CM Punk left WWE in 2019, he appeared on Colt Cabana's Art of Wrestling podcast to discuss his time with the company. He ran down Vince McMahon, Triple H, the creative process, and most critically, Dr. Steve Amman, WWE's resident medical expert. Punk claimed that WWE's doctor misdiagnosed a deadly staph infection, instead being told to work through it. Shortly after the podcast, the doctor then filed a lawsuit for defamation, not only on Punk, but also his friend Colt, who hosted the show. Once all was said and done, the courts found them both not liable for defamation, but the suit left them with a mountain of legal fees to pay. This led to another lawsuit, this time with Colt Cabana suing his now former friend CM Punk to seek the fees he allegedly promised him. The case was dismissed, but so was their friendship. The best wrestling storylines are based in reality, and these two have a ton of material to work with. This one may depend on the status of their real-life friendship, but either way, it would be nice to revisit their old in-ring rivalry with some extra spice. This would likely be set up by CM Punk spoiling Hangman Page's world title celebrations before his Dark Order friend Colt Cabana steps in, eventually building to a Hangman vs Punk title match somewhere down the line. Some of CM Punk's greatest work happened when he was working as a heel. From the cult leader of the Straight Edge Society to the venomous corporate champion during the summer of Punk in Ring of Honor, he thrives under a sea of hate. This entry is an AEW spin on both the Ring of Honor and WWE versions of the summer of Punk. Of course, we require an instant heel turn from CM Punk, as after the debut to a thunderous reaction, he cuts a pipe bomb style promo about why he walked away from wrestling to begin with and why he didn't join AEW sooner. He blames the fans and tells them that he meant every word he said on that stage in Las Vegas. The fans still follow him around the airport looking for an autograph to sell on eBay because they're too lazy to go get a real job. He goes full Jim Cornette on the AEW product, claiming it's merely a gymnastics contest and isn't representative of the professional wrestling he helped build. He's not here to take part, he's here to bring the whole thing down. Punk then claims he's here for 2 things: that sweet Tony Khan paycheck and the AEW world title, and when he gets that, he's walking away once again. This sparks a reaction from company executive Cody Rhodes, who counters Punk's argument, claiming he only stayed away because he knows he's past his best, before shooting down Punk's criticisms of AEW and says he'll show him in the ring what real pro wrestling is. This leads to an old school wrestling match between the two men. Headlocks and holds, no flips and tricks. Punk must now get past the gatekeeper of AEW, Cody Rhodes, before his pursuit of the AEW rankings can begin. For this next pitch, we'll be pitting CM Punk against one of the most popular men in AEW, former world champion Jon Moxley. This story once again requires a heel turn from Punk as he plays the role of a bitter mentor. For those that don't know, Jon Moxley's rise in WWE as Dean Ambrose is very much tied to CM Punk, as in 2012 Ambrose made his main roster debut as part of The Shield alongside Roman Reigns and Seth Rollins. Called up from developmental after being stuck in WWE's feeder system of Florida Championship Wrestling for nearly a year, Ambrose and his crew were brought up as the protectors of CM Punk's WWE Championship. The Mercenaries first debuted at the Survivor Series, powerbombing Punk's opponent Ryback through the announce desk, allowing the champion's reign to continue. Eventually, the Shield would go off and do their own thing, becoming one of the most dominant factions in wrestling history, but in this storyline, Punk claims that without him, Moxley would still be stuck in a warehouse in Florida. Of course, Moxley disagrees with these claims and said he scratched and clawed for everything he's earned in this business, and he wasn't handed anything by anyone, especially CM Punk. The back and forth promos between Moxley and Punk would be absolute gold and could lead to a compelling story. During the feud, we can even have CM Punk try to play the numbers game, recruiting a new set of mercenaries to watch his back. This would allow Moxley to draft in his friend Eddie Kingston to somewhat even the odds, as who doesn't want to see Eddie Kingston and CM Punk go back and forth on the mic? The feud has so many possibilities and would be a great way to launch CM Punk straight to the top of the card by having him go up against a former world champion. For this next entry to make sense, plans are gonna have to change for the AEW World Championship main event at All Out, which we can assume will be the champion Kenny Omega versus Hangman Page. Whilst it seems Hangman is set to dethrone Omega, we have to put that on ice for a little bit longer. At the pay-per-view, Omega stands tall after defeating Hangman Page once again. He's joined by the Young Bucks, the Good Brothers, and Don Callis in the ring. We see 5 hooded men with masks on enter through the crowd and surround the ring. One of the men climbs on the apron, points at the Elite with a gun sign, before the other 4 rush in to beat the Elite down. The 4 men in the ring take off their masks and hoodies to reveal themselves as Tama Tonga, Tonga Loa, Kenta, and Jay White. The 5th man gets into the ring, picks Kenny Omega up, and hits him with a GTS. He unmasks to reveal himself as CM Punk. Then Punk takes off his hoodie to reveal his Bullet Club t-shirt. Over the past few weeks, a feud between the Bullet Club and the Elite has been teased on Impact Wrestling, so why not have CM Punk kickstart his AEW career as the leader of the faction? This sets up a CM Punk run in New Japan, an eventual title match with Kenny Omega when Punk climbs up the rankings after defeating Elite member after Elite member. This could technically also be set up with a Hangman title win, who gets beaten down after the match by the Elite, then saved by the Bullet Club, but this makes less sense as he's already got backup in the form of the Dark Order, unless they've been taken out too. Either way, CM Punk's Bullet Club versus the Elite would be an internet wrestling fan's wet dream. And quickly, just before we continue, make sure you scroll down and drop a like and subscribe with notifications turned on so you don't miss any upcoming wrestling content as we head towards 20,000 subscribers. But now that you've done that, let's get on with the rest of the video. MJF is arguably the best talker in wrestling today and isn't afraid to cross the line in order to get heat. Can you imagine the war of words between the man that's better than you and the best in the world? To kick this feud off, we need to take advantage of the current CM Punk hype train, whilst also finishing off the MJF Chris Jericho feud a little bit earlier than planned. On the first ever episode of AEW Rampage, let's headline the show with Chris Jericho versus MJF after Jericho successfully gets through the labors of Jericho, which is an ongoing storyline where MJF is laying out 4 challenges for Jericho in order to get a match with him. In the contest, MJF comes out on top, giving him a legitimate claim of being the best in the world, and we need him to use those exact words. This will tease a feud with Punk, and every time MJF is seen from here on out, CM Punk chants will fill the arena. This sets up a moment that will go down in AEW history as the Dynamite before All Out, which is also in Chicago, Cult of Personality hits, sending the crowd into a frenzy. 30 seconds pass and nothing happens before the music stops. MJF walks out laughing as he runs down the Chicago crowd, becoming the ultimate troll. As MJF's cutting his promo, the lights go out as Sirius, which is the Chicago Bulls music, starts playing. Spotlights then start to swirl around the arena and we can see CM Punk pushing his way through the crowd. Punk then gets to the ring happening as the main light comes back on, with MJF turning around into a devastating GTS. CM Punk is here. Then for the upcoming All Out pay-per-view that weekend, advertised that CM Punk will address his AEW debut, which should sell a bunch of pay-per-views. During his promo, MJF interrupts him and says that Punk turned his back on the fans and he's gonna regret ever stepping foot in his company. Even having referenced Punk's time in the UFC before saying that his AEW career is gonna be even more pathetic. This feud would make MJF and Punk the talk of the wrestling world and may even pull in some UFC fans to support MJF. And for me, this is the #1 pick for how to debut CM Punk in AEW whilst elevating MJF to a whole new level. And before you go, make sure you check out my 10 cancelled AEW plans video where I discuss CM Punk's history with AEW.